Mrs. Taylor will now introduce the subject, As You Were, and she will prepare the way for Colonel Taylor, who will follow.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it was with extreme reluctance that I've come here tonight, I may tell you that. But your secretary persuaded me to do so. And when I look at this very learned-looking assembly in front of me, I'm rather sorry that I did consent. Well, when I look back on my life and look for sort of historical events that might interest you, they're very few and far between. I met my husband when I was very young. He taught me to ride when I was 13. So you can see that most of my memories are mingled with his. And I have very few of my own to relate to you. But I'm going to tell you of a little of an incident that happened when I was about 9 years old. Didn't concern myself, but concerned a lady that I visited. My father was the rector of St. Bartholomew's Church in Alice. He was a very broad-minded old man. If he went out to take services outside his parish, outside the village, we had to go to church. He didn't mind where we went as long as we went. We went to the Wesleyans, we went to the Presbyterians, we went here and we went there. But we had to go to church. After Sunday school, every Sunday, we had to go out and visit the poor and the aged and the sick. Didn't matter what denomination they belonged to, but we had to go and visit them. Well, at that time in Alice, there was an old couple by the name of Mr. and Mrs. Furman. They were Germans. I don't remember much about Mr. Furman. He was an old chappie with a long white beard who stood in front of the jail and opened the door and let prisoners in and let them out. And on Saturday mornings, he acted as librarian. And I'd go down to the library and I'd sit there and I'd get the naughty comic of that day called Alice Sloper and I'd hide it behind another paper. And he'd come and look over my shoulder and he'd seize it away from me and he'd knock me over the nose with a pencil. That's all I remember about Mr. Furman. But anyhow, he died. And then old Mrs. Furman was added to our visiting list. On Sunday afternoons, I had to go and visit her. And she was a wonderful old lady. She'd tell me tales of the old, old days in Germany and how she used to go to school and how her teacher would put her over his knees and smack her bottom well and truly. And then one day she told me how she came out to this country. And this is the story I want to tell you. You know, I've got to use my spectacles and find these dates. In the year 1854 and 1856, England had on her hands the Crimean War. 1856 to 1858, she had the Indian Mutiny. And her losses in both those wars were terrific, not only from wounds, but from illness, sickness. Cholera was rife. And so she had perforce to engage mercenary troops. Most of these mercenaries came from Germany, German Legion, and they fought with her, with the British troops. Well, at the end of the war, Britain said to the German government, "Oh, thank you very, very much. We're so glad to have had the use of your men. We are now sending them back to you." But the Germans said, "No, thank you, no. You've had the use of them, you must now find homes for them." So Great Britain was forced then to find homes for the Germans. And so she thought, oh, well, South Africa. That's where we want them. We want them to act as a buffer between the Transkei and the Eastern Province. But we must have married men. We've got 100 young unmarried men. Would you please find them wives? So all over Germany, in the churches, the pastors stood up and pleaded for volunteers from the young women of their congregation to volunteer to come out to South Africa as the wives of these young German soldiers. And my old friend, Mrs. Furman, was one of the ladies who volunteered. She and a couple of friends of hers. And they went up before a selection board, and she was chosen. And they were told that on a certain date, they had to go to Hamburg. They went down to Hamburg. They were lined up on the docks. Just in the harbor was a boat, and on the decks were 100 young German soldiers lined up. These German girls were marched up until each one faced a German soldier. They'd never seen them in their lives before. But the man to which they were paired was to be their future husband. A pastor came and stood at the front of the line and read the marriage service over the whole lot of them. They'd never seen their future husbands, but there the marriage service was read over them. And then after that was finished, they went up in couples, 2 by 2, man and a woman. They gave the pastor their names. He joined their hands together and pronounced them man and wife. They wheeled off to the right and to the left. And the next couple came along, and so they were married. And so there my old friend Mrs. Furman and had a very happy marriage with a man that she'd never seen until the minute that she was married to him on board that ship. And I think that's a little bit of history that very few people know about. They know how the German settlers came out here, but I don't think many of them know how these marriages happened. And this is absolutely authentic because I had it from the mouth of one of these women who was there, who was married at that time. Now, that's my little bit of history. Now, I want to tell you, I think anybody who knows anything about horses these days is a little bit of back history. You're also interested in motor cars and aeroplanes and so on, but I don't think horses matter very much to you. But I tell you that my husband taught me to ride when I was 13. And there he put into me a love of horses. And the happiest days of my life, I can say without a doubt, was when my husband was in charge of a mobile squadron, mounted police in Mthatha. The mobile squadron of police in Mthatha was 100 strong. 100 men and 100 horses. And I love the horses more than the men, I can tell you that. But anyhow, they were very, very happy days. I worked with the men. They used to call me their mobile mother. I ran their dances. I ran all their functions. I did the catering at their sports and so on. And I rode their horses. Whenever a new horse came in and was allotted to a man, he'd come to me and he'd say, "Mrs., I've got a new horse. Wouldn't you like to ride him?" I'd say, "Thank you, I would." And off I'd go and I'd ride these horses. At one show, I rode 6 horses, one after the other, trotting, jumping, any sort of show that there was, I rode these horses. And then my husband became district commandant of the whole district, as well as in charge of the mobile squadron. And he used to do his inspections on horseback. And on one occasion I went with him. He rode a horse called Rookie, a lovely old bay. I rode a big grey horse called Creole, 15 hand, 2 inches high, great big chap like that. We had a backman on his horse and a pack horse, one of my children's ponies called Maya. We parked my children with the grandma, and off we went. And I want to tell you about this ride because I don't think many people these days could understand it. It was about the year 1924. And we started off from Mthatha. First day we rode to Bashim Bridge, 36 miles. That was the first day. Second day, Bashim Bridge to Novo, 19 miles. Novo to Karla, 38 miles. Karla to Southyville, 28 miles. Southyville to Coffin Barber, 30 miles. Coffin Barber to Soma, 18 miles. Soma to Ngomaquet, 16. Ngomaquet to Butterworth, 18. Butterworth to Kentani, 22. Kentani to Willowvale, 29. Willowvale to Elliotdale, 30. Elliotdale to Condully, 18. Condully to Mtata, back again, 18. 320 miles we rode in 22 days. Of course, when nowadays, and you can do those 320 miles in just a few hours, it seems nothing. But in those days, to ride for 22 days was a great feat for a woman. I always remember that the little pack horse, Maya, objected to being led. And so we let him loose. And he used to run behind us, stop and graze, and then look up, see us in front of him, and whinny and come running after us. And then we went through the Bashi River. The batsman thought he ought to lead this horse. And so he took hold of him and he leading him through the river when Maya suddenly jipped, and off went the batsman into the river. And then we were riding through Kala, and there was a tennis match going on. And the pigs just turned round and stared at this sort of cavalcade coming along, and all the rackets were dropped, and they rushed to the fence to have a look at us going through Kala. We were such a funny sight to them. And so, as I say, a lot of you people nowadays just don't know the joys that we did experience from our love and our knowledge of horses. Now, I was in the army for about 4 years. I was in the South African Women's Auxiliary Service in Mthatha. I was divisional commissioner. And a circular came out asking for mature women for barracks work. Well, I thought, well, that just suited me. So I volunteered for barracks work in the army, and I went up to Pretoria, and I was examined, and I was accepted. And then I was sent down to Springfield, and I opened up the Springfield barracks at the hospital in Durban. And there I had charge of all the administrative staff, the women in the administrative staff of the hospital. From there, I went to Port Elizabeth, and I was in charge of the girls of the artillery. And from there, I came here back to East London. And there, I was in charge of all the servicewomen in Mthatha. And I'm very pleased to say that I still know them, and they still know me, and we have very happy times together in our ex-service association. And one last bit of history that I want to tell you is that I at one time taught your secretary. When she was in Standard 3, I taught her. So all the virtues that she has now, you can please attribute some of them to me. Thank you.
Colonel Taylor, will you now address the meeting?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you tonight a little talk on a well-known citizen of East London of 40-odd years ago. To many of you, I don't suppose the name Ronnie McLean means very much. The younger generation, I don't suppose, have heard of him, but he was what you could describe as a fine English gentleman. As a matter of fact, he was an Irishman. But I must tell you his history to begin. His father was Colonel McLean, the governor of Natal. The old man had 4 sons, Jack, Ronnie, Alan, and a 4th. I can't remember the 4th man's name. But they were all daredevils. That's all could. First into an action and the last to come out. My father, who served with them, said they were a wonderful crowd, these 4 boys. And he was a great friend of the McLeans. Now, 44 years ago, Ronnie McLean was living in retirement out at Cove Rock. And this is where my story actually begins. I'm not going to tell you about the murder case. Ronnie McLean was charged with murder. He was tried. I'm not going to tell you all the details of the murder and the trial, because you can read all about it in Benjamin Bennett's book, This Was a Man, the life of Uppington, the barrister. It's all put out in detail. But what I am going to tell you are little sidelines, little things that happened that never appeared in print. Now, I want to go back and tell you about these 4 boys before, because there's something rather interesting. Jack McLean, that was the eldest, Captain Glenn, finished up at Port Alfred, riddled with rheumatism. The government gave him a small pension, and they gave him the ferry down there. And there he lived until he died, and he had 4 very lovely daughters. All the McLeans are good looking, I might tell you, and these 4 girls were 4 very fine girls. Ronnie McLean also had daughters, all very nice looking girls. Now, Jack, as I say, Jack, riddled with rheumatism, he died. Ronnie was here. Alan, I suppose it must have been some, 70, 80 years ago, was out with a crowd of young fellows on horseback out at the Orange Grove Hotel. Now, if you know the Orange Grove Hotel, there's the main road, and there's the road that goes to the hotel like this, and out the other side. Well, these young lads had been there. It was a bright moonlight when they came out, full of hops, they were having a real good time of it. And Ronnie McLean, Alan said, "Look, what do I see? A span of oxen right across the road. Gosh, that's something. I'm going to see what I can do." A wagon apparently had come along, and they'd outspanned for the night, and the oxen were right across the road, lying down. So Alan says, "Come on." And away went, and just as he got to, an ox stood up. Over, stone dead. Poor Alan's neck was broken. The 4th boy, I can't remember his name, died in a tent somewhere near Frisco, Uppington. I don't know what his work was. He was doing some survey work. I'm not quite certain. At any rate, they found him dead in his tent. You see, a tragic family. Now, I'll come back to Ronnie. Ronnie had a very, very pretty daughter. And she was staying with her brother-in-law, Gordon Tripp, at the hotel at Burgersdorp, when she met a very fascinating young man by the name of Barone. And they became engaged. He came down to Cove Rock, this young Barone. When I say was, I suppose, Lily was 23, and he must have been about 37 or 38, I should think. Very handsome boy. And he was out at, and old McLean said, what a nice boy he is. We have a very fascinating boy. Then McLean suddenly discovered that he was a married man. So he said, "Out you go. I'll have nothing more to do with you." Now, you could just imagine Ronnie's indignation was when he found that this man was a married man. Well, there was a lot of trouble, and he told Barone that if he came to the house again, there'd be trouble. He came into town, and he got hold of Barone, and he said, "If you interfere with my daughter again, if I had a pistol now, I'd shoot you." Well, things was quiet for a little while, and then Barone said to Lily, "Oh, do come in, I must see you once." And she came in, and she said, "No, nothing more." At any rate, she stayed with some friends in town, and the next morning, Barone said, "I'll persuade your father everything's all right." And they went out to Cove Rock in the cab. Now, old Ronnie must have anticipated this, so he took his carbine, Martini Henry carbine, a few rounds of ammunition, and he went out. Well, there was a shooting match, and Brown got a bullet through him, a Martini Henry bullet through him, and he died. And a warrant was taken out for Ronnie McLean's arrest. Now, this is where I came into the picture. At that time, just before that, I'd had a commission in the Cape Mounted Police, a lieutenant, up in Bechuanaland. When Merriman's government came into power, or a little afterwards, they went bankrupt. And they said to me and to a good many others, young man, you can take a month's pay and get out. We retrench you, or you can go back to the ranks. You can go back. So what could we do? We all became sergeants. I was sent down to East London in command of the Mounted. There were two separate, there was the Cape Mounted Police and the Town Police. Our duties started outside the Commonage, from the Right House right down to London, somewhere that way. And of course, Ronnie McLean was in my area. I was told to go out and arrest him, given the warrant. And now I must tell you that Ronnie and I were great friends. When he heard that I was the son of his old friend, it was Wally and Ronnie. He said, come on, Wally. I said, come on, Ronnie. And I say we were really great friends. So you can imagine the shock it was to me to have to go out and arrest my father's old friend and my friend, because he was a dear old man, as straight as a die, the perfect gentleman. Well, I thought, the only thing I can do is, come on, Christmas Eve, 24th of December, 1909, raining, rather chilly. So I took a spare horse out, and I took one of my men with me. And we went out, we got to Cove Rock, just about, I suppose it was about 6 o'clock. And then, of course, as soon as I came, the tears, and one said, don't, it's nothing to do with you, my women. Small mitre, and leave Wally alone. Come on, Wally, come downstairs. And there we sat down and had supper together. Ronnie, his wife, not Lily. I don't know what became of Lily. I think she was in the back somewhere. And the man I brought with me, and we had supper. And he said to me, look here, Wally, must I go in tonight? I said, I'm afraid. He said, look, I give you my word of honor. I'll be tomorrow morning in East London at 6 o'clock. And I know he would have been. But of course, it was beyond my power to give anybody that permission. So I said, come on, Ronnie. And got on the horses, and we rode in. As I say, you can just imagine it, a miserable ride. And I was saying, oh, Ron, it'll be all right, man. Back up. It's not your fault, you know. Oh, he said, you know, I didn't even aim at him. I shot over his head. I was frightening. I wanted to frighten him. I said, of course you did. We got to the West Bank, and he said, I say, Wally, you know, I'm going to be inside, I suppose, for some time. What about a little drink? So I said, right. So I handed the horses to my man, and I was in civilians, by the way. I went out as civilian. And Ronnie and I went in and said, hello, Ronnie. All the boys have, well, Ronnie, this, and oh, by Jove, you come in to join us and drink? He said, yes, of course. And I brought my friend with me. So there we sat around and had drinks, Ronnie and all these boys. And if I'd left him, old Ronnie was hook on the top, as they say. At any rate, I said to Ronnie, come on. Well, we got across the bridge, right down to within about 100 yards into Station Street. He said, Wally, old man, he said, what about another little drink? Now, Ronnie drank what you call one of them. That's an old CMR drink, brandy and ginger ale. And the correct way to drink it, that is in the army, you took your bottle, put some out, pour the brandy into the bottle, shook it up, so that you could a certain amount of all the bubbles went up your nose, you see, and you got a little bit of a thrill out of it. Well, at any rate, I said to my man, here's a shilling, go there to that hotel, that Royal Grand Hotel, and bring me a bottle of one of them. And there in the street, about 50 yards from the jail, Ronnie McLean had his last drink, sitting on the horseback, and he said, well, Wally, old boy, thank you, and we threw the bottle away. And he went into jail. Now, you know that Ronnie McLean had a wonderful record. He was full of decorations for bravery, especially saving life at sea. I don't know how many lives he saved, swimming out with a lifeline, bringing men in. And he was, at that time, the captain of the Rocket Brigade. And he was responsible for the saving of very many lives. And as I say, he had a lot of decorations. One little incident, he was on the West Bank and he saw a dog being washed out to sea, poor unfortunate dog. So Ronnie just dived in, got hold of the dog and saved its life. That's the sort of man Ronnie was. Well, he was, as they say, he was charged with murder. The preparatory examination took place in East London, and it was, of course, committed for trial. We applied for bail. They had, in those days, to get bail for murder, you had to go to the Supreme Court. They let Ronnie out on £2,000 bail. But the Attorney General said, it's not a bit of good Ronnie McLean being tried in East London. They'll find him not guilty before he gets into the court. We'll send him down to Cape Town. We'll have him tried down at Cape Town, an impartial jury. They'll never convict him in East London. Well, they went down, but the Attorney General didn't know Ronnie's friend. At the time, Mr. Crosby was the editor of the Dispatch. Crosby, Mr. Drake, a man with a lot of influence in this town, Dr. Nangle, Dr. Gray, and somebody else, I can't remember, all went down to Cape Town. But they got to Cape Town just 1 week before the trial started. Well, the editor, of course, Crosby, he goes to the editor of the Cape Times, and he goes to the editor of the Argus, and they have a little powwow, and then next morning, the Cove Rock murder. Who is this man? Ronnie McLean. Major. And there was a photograph of Ronnie McLean in uniform, all his medals up, you know, looking the real smart gentleman. And they went on to do all the things he'd done in his life. And it was a wonderful bit of work. You know, you can just imagine what these newspaper men are. They're like ferrets. They got everything. And they put it all down. And then, who was this man Barone that he'd shot? Well, we don't like to prejudge a man. After all, the poor man is dead. But, after all, he was warned off the course as a crook. He had been married 2 or 3 times before. He deserted his wives. He did so. You never thought it a wonderful write-up for a man who's going to be tried for murder. Well, of course, the case came on. Judge Hopley was on the bench, and that brilliant man, Uppington, defended Ronnie McLean. And in all my experience, I've never heard such a wonderful defense in all my life. You know that he actually proved 3 things. Yes, he proved first that it was an accident. He proved that it never happened at all. He never shot the man. And the third one, that if he did it, well, the other man deserved it. Well, you know, I can remember Judge Hopley throwing down his pen. He said, Mr. Uppington, isn't it rather confusing to the jury? Which one are they going to believe? He said, wait till I finish, my lord, and you'll see who they will believe. Oh, he was a masterpiece. A wonderful man was Uppington. And of course, by this time, we all said, he must get off. I arrested him. I said, he can't be tried. He can't be convicted. He mustn't be convicted. Well, the case went on. And verdict, not guilty. Do you know, of course, it's supposed to be very, very bad form to shout in a court of law. But poor old Judge Hoppy said, stop it. And the sergeant got up and said, be quiet. But everybody said, good old Ronnie. I mean, they went outside, there was a crowd outside, they picked old Ronnie up. So you shot that me, eh? Well, the good jolly good thing. Yes, you did, and we're proud of it. Well, you know, you can just imagine what Cape that street outside the law court was like for about 5 or 10 minutes. Well, that night, we had a jollification. There was Ronnie McLean, Lily McLean, Gordon Tripp, I think Crosby joined us, I'm not quite certain, and myself, about 5 or 6. And we were all drinking to Ronnie McLean's health, you see. And we saw a man standing about a few yards away. I seemed to know that man's face. I wonder who he is. And he was still looking, standing, and old McLean said, look here, you come and join us. Come on, have a drink with us. So we said, thank you very much. I would like to drink you, and may I congratulate you, Major? I'm very pleased to think you. Oh, he says, oh, thank you very much. What are you going to have to drink? So I said, we'd have so-and-so. And I looked at this man, I said, look here, where did I see you? I've seen you today. Oh, he said, I was one of the jurymen. So that is a little story of that gallant man, Ronnie McLean. Unfortunately, about 12 months or 2 years later, he got pneumonia and died. But when he was delirious, he went through the whole case, so his wife told me, in Xhosa. Eventually he died. They gave him a funeral, a military funeral. I suppose it was the largest military funeral, or any funeral that East London has ever seen. The Rocket Brigade put him on their little gun carriage, and he was taken up to Fleet. All the regiments turned out, the KRs, Border Horse, they came down from Queenstown, and when it was leaving where did it start from now? The drill hall, I think from the drill hall, or was it the church? The head of the procession was somewhere near the City Hall, right up 4 deep. You never saw anything like it. That's how we said goodbye to a real, good, honest gentleman.
There's still some time left if you want to.
Yes. Now, have I time to give you another little one? Now, this is to do with the Transkei. I don't suppose many of you know that in the year 1916, there was a minor rebellion in the Transkei. When I mentioned this to some gentleman the other day, he said, but, I never heard of it. Well, I'll tell you what happened. When we came back from the campaign in Southwest Africa, the South African police, we found that the Transkei was seething with discontent. The natives were in a very restless state. So I was sent to Mthatha and formed a small mobile squadron. My wife mentioned this mobile squadron just now, but in those days we only had about 40 men. And all of a sudden there was trouble in the Mount Frere district. It appears that the headman, Mangwana, who lived on the top of the hill in the Mount Frere district, objected to dipping his cattle. He had to send his cattle from this high land right down, we had to go 1,000 feet to the dipping tank. There, owing to their weakness, because after a beast has been dipped, he's rather weak, he had to wait there 24 hours before he could get them back again. That was 3 days, and then a week afterwards he had to send them down again, and he said, no, I will do nothing of the sort. And he defied, he wouldn't do it. So they sent him a summons, served a summons on him, which he ignored. And then the police went out with a warrant to arrest him. And he fired on the police. And the police had to retire. They sent word, and I was sent up with my 30-odd men, forced marched to try and put down this rebellion. Now, I might tell you that there are two tribes up there, the Bakas and the Shubis. The Bakas and the Shubis. And those two tribes have been at enmity for years and years. They were always clashing. One's the Mount Frere district and the other's the Mount Fletcher. And they're always fighting. They were. They were always fighting. And this man was a Shubi. No, he's a Baka, I mean. He was a Baka. And his chief was a man named Nkwenkwe. Well, I went out and I found that the Ngwana's kraal was about 20 miles inland from Mount Frere, right in amongst the mountains. So I went and saw the chief, Nkwenkwe, first. And I said, look here, Nkwenkwe, I've got to arrest this man. You've got to come along with me because you are his chief. What do you got? He said, bad with me, he should be arrested. I'll come along. I said, well, I'm going up tonight, halfway up the mountain. There's a trading station. I'm going to sleep there. And I can still see Harry Carey turning round. My long-eared friend, by the name of goodness I brought you, God only knows. So on we went again. And when we got to the top of the mountain, we found it was flat. It went on, and there for 4 or 5 miles was flat country with a big location, a fair big location on top. And when we topped the rise, the little girls gave the war cry. Now, I might tell you, in native trouble, if there's native trouble on, the young girls are sent out to act as spies. It's no good sending a man there because he might get shot, but they know that we don't shoot women. And these little girls sat and they, and you could hear. And then when you get on a little further, you'll find another one. And they pass it on, always about 300 or 400 yards in front of you, if you understand. Always getting that little 400 yards in front of us. Well, we're going along. I said to Nkwenkwe, I said, Nkwenkwe, why are they giving the battle cry? He said, you know, they're only children, they're only playing. I said, look here, Nkwenkwe, what are all those men doing on that high ground? Look at them, look at them, look at them. Well, he said, you know, they're inquisitive. They want to know what the Kokambas are doing, what the soldiers are doing here. You know, I thought, well, how did they know that I was coming up? I got suspicious. Why are they up there? And I looked, and you know, I'm quite certain they had assegais in their hands. And they were, of course, they were about half a mile away. And I thought, well, now I've got to be careful now. Riding along, and Nkwenkwe said, oh, gosh, I'm so thirsty. May I go to that hut and have a drink of water? I said, I'm also thirsty. You ride alongside me, Nkwenkwe. But, sir, I'm so thirsty. I said, so am I. Come on. Went to it. Another few. Oh, he said, you know, I'm so hungry. In that hut, I know I can get some food. And I was really suspicious. I said, Nkwenkwe, you stay with me. Oh, please. You know, I don't was wise. If I'd let him go, I wouldn't be standing before you tonight. I'd have been 40 years underground. Well, we went on and we had a fight. And there were a few killed. And I lost a man. Constable Downham was killed, one of my men. And we rounded up the ringleaders. And then the whole of the mobilization, and about 400 or 500 men came on to Mount Frere, and we made sundry arrests. And then it came out that Nkwenkwe, after I'd left him that night, had got in touch with the other tribe, and they said, now look here, we'll all come together. And there are no more soldiers left. All the soldiers have gone overseas. These are the soldiers left, just a handful. We'll wipe them out tomorrow. So easy. Now, this was the Shubis and the Bakas who had been enemies for years. They joined forces that night to wipe my little band out. Well, what's going to happen now, I thought. when the case came on, when the investigation came forward, it was brought out that Mkwenkwe was to say he wanted a drink of water. He'd get to that hut and he was going to shoot me. They said, now, if you shoot the officer, then the men will know what to do. Then we'll all come down and wipe the whole lot out, you see. So it was quite a narrow thing. If I'd been a kind-hearted old man, a young man in those days, I might have said, certainly, go and have your drink of water, you see. But I wouldn't be here today. Well, in that show, we arrested altogether 300 men. And we actually found the man who killed Downham, and he was hanged because he bragged about it. When they found some blood on his shirt, Colonel Quirk said, and where did you get that blood? He said, that is the blood of a policeman. And then Mkwenkwe was fined, the chief was fined £300, which meant nothing to him. He imposed a tribal levy. He said, go on, fine £300 to pay my fine. So easy to be a chief, you know, you can get away with a lot of it. Then Mkwenkwe got 3 years, and the others got 6 months and all that. They were actually tried in East London before Judge Sampson, I think it was, and Reynolds, Advocate Reynolds, afterwards Judge Reynolds, was one of the defending advocates, and he made a wonderful speech that day, and he got some of them off, I think. Well, that is a little incident that happened not very far from East London a good many years ago. Where's my OC?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you'll agree with me that this is quite the most entertaining evening that we've had since the Historical Society came into existence. And it's been most interesting indeed. We are very grateful indeed both to Mrs. Taylor and to Colonel Taylor for this really very interesting and entertaining evening. I was very interested to hear Mrs. Taylor's story about, well, Mrs. Firmin in Alice. There is some quite interesting information in Professor Corey's book about those mass weddings, and one doesn't hear very much. I haven't read about them anywhere else, and they must really have been a most interesting event. I'm sure that most of those weddings did. Well, thank you very much indeed, and we'll now adjourn for tea.